This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, Bruchim Haba, welcome everyone. Welcome back. Parshas Mishpatim. So Parshas Mishpatim is the first Parsha after the giving of the Torah. So you'd expect it to begin with a real bang. You know, the Rebbe just gave the Torah to Klal Yisrael. So you would expect the very first mitzvah after Nesinas HaTorah to be an important one, a fundamental one that sort of encapsulates the Yisodos HaTorah. I don't know, maybe you would have thought the Rebbe would have given Klal Yisrael Shema, Tefillin, Avas Hashem, Yiras Hashem. And we know the very first mitzvah in Parshas Mishpatim is Kisikne Eved Ivri. If you buy a Jewish slave, so he works for you for 6 years, Uvashana Ashviyas Yetzei Lachav Shechinam, he goes out free. It's somewhat of an odd mitzvah for it to be the very first mitzvah that the Rebbe gives Klal Yisrael after the Torah was given, especially in light of the fact that the mitzvah of freeing an Eved Ivri really did not apply yet, because the mitzvah of Eved Ivri only applies when Yovel applies. There was no Yovel yet, so this whole mitzvah is academic. It's not Nogea L'Maisa. It doesn't seem to be that fundamental or important. This would not be the very first mitzvah that you would have thought the Torah would have given after the Luchais, and yet it is. You know, if you had to make a list of what would the very last mitzvah to appear after the Torah was given, this might be it. This might be the least likely to make the top of the list, and yet this is the first mitzvah on the list. And this is the question that the Ramban is bothered by. The Ramban in the beginning of the Parsha, the Ramban says, Hischel HaMishpat HaRishain Be'eved Ivri. The Torah begins the very first law about Eved Ivri, Mibnei Sheyesh B'Shiluach HaEved B'Shana HaShviyas, because by sending forth a slave in the 7th year, what do you got? You have Zecher Li'Yitzias Mitzrayim. You have a remembrance of the Exodus. Hanizkar B'Dibur Rishon, which is mentioned in the very first Dibur of the Aseres HaDibros. So since in the first Dibur of the Aseres HaDibros you have a commemoration of Yitzias Mitzrayim, therefore the Rebbe Hashem also gave a mitzvah of letting the Eved Ivri go free, because one of the reasons why we let the Eved Ivri go free is a commemoration of Yitzias Mitzrayim, like the Pasuk says in the Aseres HaDibros, V'zacharta ki Eved ha'yisa b'Eretz Mitzrayim. This is actually what it says about freeing an Eved Ivri. So one of the reasons why we free the Eved Ivri is to commemorate Yitzias Mitzrayim, which is mentioned in the first Aseres HaDibros, and therefore this is the very first mitzvah given to Klal Yisrael after the Luchais. Furthermore, the Ramban says, V'yesh ba'od zeichel l'ma'aseh bereishis. This also commemorates the creation of the world. Why? Because the 7th year of the service of the Eved, his Shabbatoin mimalachas Adonov, is like the 7th day of the week of Zecher L'Maseh Bereishis. So therefore the Ramban is bothered by our question, why is freeing an Eved Ivri the very first mitzvah given after the Luchais? And the Ramban says because the Parsha, the episode of freeing an Eved Ivri, includes two very important Yisodos, Zecher L'Yitzias Mitzrayim, that's mentioned in the first Aseres HaDibros. It's also mentions. It's also Zeichel L'Maseh Bereishis, because letting the Eved Ivri go on the 7th year is similar to Shabbos, and therefore this is the very first mitzvah given after the Luchais. But certainly there must be a deeper reason here why this is the very first mitzvah. I mean, if the whole purpose is as Zeichel Yitzias Mitzrayim, Zeichel L'Maseh Bereishis, the Rebbe could have given the mitzvah of Shabbos. And that's also Zecher, the Yitzias Mitzrayim, and Zecher L'Maseh Bereishis. Why specifically the mitzvah of freeing the Eved Ivri? So this is something, b'siyata d'shmai, we like to explore tonight. Okay, that's question number one. That's the very first mitzvah that Klal Yisrael was given, but that's even before the Luchais were given. But the very first mitzvah presented to Klal Yisrael after the Nesinas HaTorah was the mitzvah of Eved Ivri. Okay, let's go for a moment to the Gemara in Kedushin on Daf Chaf Beis Amud Beis. The Gemara is discussing, we know that if the Eved Ivri does not want to leave his master in the 7th year, so we bring him to the doorpost, and we basically we make a hole in his ear with a martzeya, and we'll get to that soon. And the question is, why do we do that? Why do we make a hole in his ear? Why don't we make a hole in his nose? Make a hole in his head, make a hole, I don't know where. There are a lot of places to make holes. In America people wear earrings, but go go to Eretz Yisrael, people wear these things in different makaimos. You could make a hole anywhere. Why do we have to make a hole in the ear? So Yochim and Zakai hayadorish hamikra hazek min chomer. He darshan this pasuk like a jewel. Ma nishtana oizen mikol ivam shebeguf. What is special about the ear from all the limbs of the body? Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Oizen sheshama koili al Har Sinai. My ear, the ear that heard my voice on Mount Sinai. B'shasha amarti, when I said Kili b'nei Yisrael avodim, I said this is a pasuk in Parshas Bahar. The Jewish people are my avodim. V'lo avodim la'avodim. They're not slaves to slaves. They're slaves to me. And this guy, and this guy went ahead and I understand in the beginning he had no alternative, so he was forced to be sold as a slave. But now that he says he likes it, and this guy went ahead and he acquired a master for himself, he's violating the pasuk of Kili b'nei Yisrael avadim. But his ear heard on Har Sinai Kili b'nei Yisrael avadim. So because his ear heard those words and he's violating it, we need to make a hole in his ear. Yirtza, we make a hole in the ear. We bore a hole in the ear. And the obvious question, is the question raised by the Marsha, is that this guy was standing at Har Sinai, he heard a lot of things. He heard 613 mitzvahs. So let's say a guy speaks Lashon Hara. Do we make a hole in his ear? Because he heard on Har Sinai, and he violated it. If a guy he buys a new suit, and he doesn't check it for shatnez, and it turns out it's shatnez, do we all a hole in his ear because he heard on Har Sinai loisil b'shatnez? Let's say a guy insults somebody and he violates le'noas dvarim. Do we drill a hole in his ear because he violated loisainu ishas amisai? Let's say a guy is arrogant. Do we all a hole in his ear because he violated the pasuk v'ram levavecha v'shachachtas Hashem? So why dafka of all the mitzvahs in the Torah do we dafka make a hole in his ear because he acquired an adain for himself? He made himself an eved. The truth is, this is not even one of the 613 mitzvahs. There's no aveira in the Torah. It's not one of the 365 lavin to sell yourself as an eved. It's a hashkafa that we can infer from one of the psukim in the Torah. It's a hashkafa out of thousands of different deos that we're supposed to learn from the Torah. This is one of them. Don't be a slave to a slave, be a slave only to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So of all the thousands of hashkafas that are found in the Torah, why do we davka impose punishment for violating this one? We don't even impose punishment for violating any of the 365 lavin by drilling holes in ears. Why davka this lav? And this question is raised by none other than the Marsha. In Masechta Kedushin on Toises Derei Amaskal Manishtana says the Marsha, Kasha Ahada Kamar Oizen Shashama Lama Loy Nemra Kain Gam B'Mitzvahs Acheros Shenemru B'Sinai. That is question number 2. Why do we dafka drill a hole in the guy's ear? Because he violated Kili b'nei Yisrael avadim. Question number 3, this is my favorite one. I love this question. The Gemara wants to know, why do we drill the hole by the doorpost and by the door? Why do we drill a hole by the door and the doorpost from all? Why don't we go to Echveis? We should go to his computer. Obviously, he spent too much time on his computer. So he wasn't doing what he needed to do. So we should drill a hole by the computer. Or we should drill a hole by, we could pick it in the basement. Why do we drill a hole dafka by the door and the doorpost? Says the Gemara, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, De'elesu mezuzah, the door and the doorpost. Shahu Eidim b'Mitzrayim, who are witnesses in Egypt. B'shasha pasachti ala mashkoif, when I jumped over their door and their lintel, v'ashtei hamezuzah, and the 2 doorposts, v'amarti, and when I jumped over their door, what did I say? Kili b'nei Yisrael avodim. Every time Rebbe Shem jumped over a Jewish house, the Rebbe Shem called out, Kili b'nei Yisrael avodim. God jumped over Yankel's house. Rebbe Shem said, Yankel, Kili b'nei Yisrael avodim. God jumped over Beryl's house. Beryl, Kili b'nei Yisrael avodim. And the door and the doorpost heard it. V'lo avodim la'avodim. And I took you out of slavery. And this guy went and acquired a master. So we need to awl his ear. We need to bore a hole in his ear by the door and the doorpost. Because the door and the doorpost in Mitzrayim were witnesses to the Rebbe Shem's cry, Kili b'nei Yisrael avadim. This is my favorite kasha. You ready for this kasha? What in the world is the Gemara talking about? That when Hashem jumped over the door, he cried out, Ki li b'nei Yisrael avadim. Mehechi teisi, Hashem said, Ki li b'nei Yisrael avadim. Hashem said, Ki li b'nei Yisrael when he jumped over the door. This is a pasuk in Parshas Bahar. The pasuk says in Parshas Bahar, Ki li b'nei Yisrael avadim, avadai heima shor etzeis yosem me'eretz Mitzrayim. It's talking about listening to the laws of the land, of mitzvahs atuliyos ba'aretz. And Hashem says, look, you're my slaves, you got to listen to me. So what in the world is the Gemara saying that the Rebbeinu Shalom said these words when he jumped over our houses in Mitzrayim? That's not when he said these words. Rebbeinu Shalom never said the words Ki li b'nei Yisrael avadim when he jumped over our homes. It's a pasuk in Bahar. He said it twice, once in Bahar and once some other time. That's not reported in the Chumash, that the Gemara somehow has a tradition that Rebbeinu Shalom said these words when he jumped over our house. What in the world does the Gemara mean that when Hashem jumped over our home in Mitzrayim, he said the words Ki li b'nei Yisrael avadim? That's not what it says in the Chumash. In the Chumash, Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't say this until the end of Sefer Vayikra. It's a good kasha, no? What's the Gemara talking about? That's question number 3. Question number 4. There's a very important sefer. It's a very good sefer. It's not a new sefer, and even though it doesn't have haskamas in it, it's still a good sefer. The name of the sefer is Sefer Yirmiyahu. Yeah, Sefer Yirmiyahu, the Navi Jeremiah. And there are a few instances in Nevi'im, and this is a very important yesod. The few times in Nevi'im where the Navi tells you information of what happened earlier on in the stories of the Chumash, that in the Chumash itself it doesn't tell you. So in other words, let's say the Navi Yecheskel talks about a nevuah that Aaron HaKohen had in Mitzrayim. It doesn't say it in Sefer Shemais. There are certain episodes that are not reported in the Chumash when they happen. They're only reported after the fact in the Nevi'im. We have it in Yecheskel, we have it in Yirmiyah, and it's a phenomenon that Victor Miller talks about. Why does the Tanakh work that way, where B'Shas Maisa it's not reported, and later on after the fact, the Navi talks about it. So this is another example. The Navi Yirmiyah says like this, that the Rebbeinu Shalom comes to Yirmiyah, and he says, listen up Yirmiyah, on the day that I took Klal Yisrael out of Mitzrayim, Beis Avadim, I made a covenant with them, I made a treaty with them. Really? Nothing of the sort is reported in the Chumash. In the Chumash it says, on the day we left Mitzrayim, Rebbeinu Shalom gave us Dam Pesach, Dam Milah, and he says, get out, eat your matzah and get out of here. But the Navi Yirmiyah says more. The Navi Yirmiyah says, on the day that Klal Yisrael left Mitzrayim, the Rebbeinu Shalom made a deal with us. What's the treaty? That at the end of 7 years, you need to send your Eved free. He could work for you for 6 years, and on 7 years come, you need to set him free. And Klal Yisrael did not listen to the Rebbeinu Shalom, and they all kept their Eved Ivris. They did not let the Eved Ivri go free, even though the Rebbeinu Shalom says, I made a covenant that I'm taking you out on condition you let the Eved Ivri go free. Says the Navi Yirmiyah, but you guys were much better, and you guys let your Eved Ivri go free, and you wanted to listen to the Rebbeinu Shalom. But then you changed your mind, and you continued to utilize them, and you don't let them go free anymore. So says the Rebbeinu Shalom, Lachein koyamar Hashem, you didn't listen to me to call Durar to your brothers, and you continued to subjugate your Jewish slaves. Therefore, you did not observe my bris. So right now we're going to make another covenant. The covenant that we made was a real covenant, says the Navi Yirmiyah, where you actually walk through 2 pieces of an egel. Very interesting. So here the Navi is saying that this was not just an oral covenant. If you look in Pasuk Yud Ches, v'nasati es hanoshim ha'ivrim esbrisi, asher lo yhekimu es divrei abris, asher karsu lefanai, ha'egel asher karsu l'shnayim. They cut a cow in 2, vayavru bein b'sarav. Says the Rebbeinu Shalom, because you did not free your Jewish slaves, I will call freedom to your enemy to utterly destroy Klal Yisrael. Chas v'shalom. In other words, says Rebbeinu Shalom, you know why you're going into Golus in the time of Bayis Rishon? Because you did not fulfill the covenant that I sealed with your forefathers, that I'm only taking you out of Mitzrayim if you free your Jewish slaves. And you guys did not free your Jewish slaves, just like your ancestors. Therefore, the whole Golus of Churban Bayis Rishon is about to occur, because you don't free your Jewish slaves. So imagine the scene. Jewish people are leaving Mitzrayim. Rebbe Shalom says, beware, be prepared, I'm going to give you the Torah. And now I'm making a deal with you that you have to observe the following. So we would have expected, Rebbe Shalom said, we're making a deal, you have to observe the whole Torah. Or you have to observe Chveis, the Aseres HaDibros, or Shabbos. No! There's only one mitzvah in the Torah that the Rebbe Shalom says, I'm taking you out of Egypt on condition that you fulfill this deal and this treaty and this covenant. You gotta free the Jewish slaves. Meaning the whole Yetzias Mitzrayim was dependent, the Navi Yirmiyah says, on freeing your Jewish slaves. And the whole Golos and Churban Yushalayim was because they didn't free Jewish slaves. Why is that so important? Why is Yetzias Mitzrayim contingent on freeing Jewish slaves? And by the way, this is not Chazal. This is not Gemara. These are psukim in Yirmiyah. That Rebbeinu Shalom, when He took us out of Mitzrayim, He made a bris that I'm taking you out on condition you are paida, you're Jewish slaves, you free them. And if you don't free them, God says, I'm calling freedom to all your enemies.
Where do we see that they didn't free them?
The Navi Yirmiyah says they didn't free them. The name, it's Lashon Hara, I can't say. But that's what the Navi Yirmiyah says. The Jews did not free their slaves. By the way, so we have over here the Sichos Musar, Reb Chaim Shmulevitz says that, but where in the Chumash do we see that the Rebbeinu Shalom is telling Klal Yisrael they have to free their Jewish slaves? Then on the Pasuk, Vayitzavim el Bnei Yisrael, the Yushalmi darshans, what was Moshe Rabbeinu supposed to command Bnei Yisrael? Parshas Shiluach Avadim. And that, in other words, that which the Navi Yirmiyah reveals to us, the Yushalmi says is already merumaz in the pasuk of Vayitzavim al Bnei Yisrael. So it comes out, Hafla V'Fel asks Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, why in the world, the moment they're leaving Mitzrayim, you would think the Rebbeinu Shalom would say, keep the Torah, keep the Aseres HaDibros, keep the Lavin Sheish B'hem Kares. No, what does the Rebbeinu Shalom say? I'm making a deal with you and I'm taking you out of Egypt on condition you free your slaves. In fact, the Yushalmi continues, Leinenshu Yisrael al Ela al Parsha Shiluach Avadim. Klal Yisrael was only punished in the times of the Churban because they didn't free their slaves. Why? That makes a lot of sense. If they're only redeemed from Mitzrayim on condition that they free their slaves, so the Churban occurred because they didn't free their slaves. So ask Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, Misbar min aksuvim, ki kogzeras hagolos, hoisa oynesh al shebitlu mitzvazu. V'lama mitzvazu dafka. Why dafka this mitzvah? Ki aleha nitztavu. They're commanded for this. Ve'aleha nichras bris. V'yoim hoitzi oisa me'eretz Mitzrayim. V'hi gufa tzarach biur. This requires a lot of explanation. Why would the whole exodus of Egypt be contingent upon freeing their slaves? In other words, like this, the Rebbeinu Shalom anyway is going to be commanding Klal Yisrael to free their slaves on Har Sinai. Why specifically command them to free their slaves the moment they're leaving Mitzrayim? So it almost sounds like the most important mitzvah in the Torah is what? Free and Eved Ivri. Why? How do we see it's the most important mitzvah in the Torah? It's the one covenant the Rebbeinu Shalom made with us when we left Mitzrayim. It's the reason for Golos Yerushalayim. And it's the first mitzvah given to Klal Yisrael after the Torah was given in Parshas Mishpatim. Why is this such a fundamental mitzvah? Why were we only taken out of Mitzrayim on condition we free our Jewish slaves? Why was the whole Churban of Yerushalayim? Because we did not free the Eved Ivri. Let's come back and look at Tosfos. By the way, Reb Chaim Shmulevitz points out that the whole din of Eved Ivri is only noyeg bisman that Yovel is noyeg. So it's academic because Yovel did not begin at least until we got into Eretz Yisrael. And yet the whole Torah is contingent upon a mitzvah given the day we left Mitzrayim, which wasn't even a nogeah yet. So what's the whole meaning over here? Why was this mitzvah the condition of our freedom of Mitzrayim? I guess those are al pi drush, but al pi the pshat of the psukim say that it was because we didn't free the Eved Ivri. So what do we make the whole with? So we know we use a martzeya. What's a martzeya? How do you translate martzeya? A boar is a pig. But what is a martzeya? A boar is a pig as a noun. As a verb, it means to make a hole, right? But what's the martzeya? An awl. The only reason why Jews know what the word awl means is because in the stone Chumash it translates martzeya as an awl. But had it not translated awl, then most people would think awl is just a type of detergent. But what exactly is an awl? Awl is some kind of metal thing, right? That you make a hole in the ear of the Eved Ivri. Where else do we find the word martzeya in the Chumash? I don't think anywhere. I'm not familiar. Where else in Tanakh? I'm not familiar with any other time that this word appears. Maybe it does. So where does this word come from? Why do we use this word? So Rashi, Tosfos says, it's a gematria. The gematria of martzeya is 400. That since Klal Yisrael were avodim for 400 years, and they were redeemed, so therefore, and this guy went ahead and it was acquired an adain for himself. Therefore, we use the martzeya to sort of knock into his brain, pal, you were a slave we were slaves in time for 400 years, and this is what you're doing? You're acquiring an adain for yourself. In other words, somehow the whole message of the martzeya is to commemorate being in Mitzrayim for 400 years. So what's the meaning over here? Why is it important to use this martzeya, that the martzeya has gematria of 400? So I want to share with you one of my favorite pieces in all the shiurim, a very fundamental yesod, a very powerful yesod, an incredible idea that is advanced by the Shlach HaKadosh in Parshas Lech Lecha. You ever notice, what do we call Eretz Yisrael in Chumash in the Tanakh? Sometimes it's called Eretz Yisrael, and more often than not, it's called Eretz Canaan, which is very strange. That's like calling the United States of America the land of the Navajo Indians, or the land of the Eskimos. Look, it's 2019. There are no Indians, there are no more Eskimos here. There's the United States of America. So why would we call Eretz Yisrael Eretz Canaan? We're supposed to obliterate the Canaanim, destroy the Canaanim. We're not even allowed to let one Canaani survive, like Sechaya Kol Neshama. Why do we continue to refer to Eretz Yisrael as Eretz Canaan? We had to kill out the Canaanim. We're not supposed to have a memory of the Canaanim. Why call the land Eretz Canaan? It's Eretz Yisrael. And yet the Chumash insists on constantly referring to Eretz Yisrael as Eretz Canaan. Furthermore, remember Avram Avinu at the Bris Bein HaBasarim? The Rebbeinu Shalom says, Lo yirosh chazeh. This guy is not going to yarshin you. Kiyim asher yitzei mimeyecha hu yiroshecha. The one that comes out of your loins, he's going to yarshin you. What does it mean, Lo yirosh chazeh? Who's the zeh that the Rebbeinu Shalom is telling Avram he's not going to inherit you? Eliezer. Why would have Avraham thought Eliezer is going to yarshin him? Eliezer is not related to him. Eliezer is his butler, his assistant, his shamish. There's no halacha that a shamish yarshins. It's not a halacha. A shamish does not yarshin. So why does Rebbeinu Shalom have to tell Abraham, Lo yirosh chazeh? Says the Shlach HaKadosh, I have a pella of akasha. We know one of the great motivations of observing the Torah is Yitzias Mitzrayim. Why in the world did we have to be in Mitzrayim for 400 years? Let the Rebbeinu Shalom put us in Mitzrayim for 10 years, for 5 years, for 1 year, and then take us out and we would be indebted to Him. Why 400 years? You know how dangerous it was to be in Mitzrayim 400 years? The Rambam says if we would have been Mitzrayim for another moment, then all the Amunah that Avraham Avinu implanted into our DNA would have been lost forever, the Rambam says. The way that Arizal says it is that we would have fallen to the 50th level of Tumah, and we never would have been able to recover. Why keep us in Mitzrayim for 400 years? We know the Ibn Ezra writes that we had such a slave mentality and low morale that Moshe Rabbeinu had to grow up outside of the rest of Klal Yisrael, otherwise he would never have been able to be a leader. So we got really almost ruined forever by being in Mitzrayim for 400 years. What was the kavanah of the Rebbeinu Shalom to keep us in Mitzrayim for 400 years? Says the Shla, being in Mitzrayim for 400 years was the greatest benefit that ever happened to Klal Yisrael. Had we not been in Mitzrayim, then we would not be loyal servants of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is one of the most important things that we need to hear in this generation. We live in a generation of uplifting Torah, feel-good Torah, fuzzy-wuzzy Torah? Does the Torah make you cozy and warm? Does the Torah make you feel nice and is it uplifting? Is it resonating with your heart? Am I connecting? Everybody wants to connect. It's all nice and dandy. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. You want to connect? You're not always going to connect. Not every morning when the alarm clock rings at 6:15 or whenever you get up for Shacharis, are you going to feel you're on a high, fuzzy-wuzzy. I want to fuzzy-wuzzy my way to shul and pray to the Lord. That doesn't work. It works sometimes, but it doesn't work always. If your Judaism is based only on feel good, it's not really worth its weight of anything. The bottom line is, a Jew needs to serve God because you're a servant and a slave to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You're an Eved. You're an Eved to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is not to take away that you shouldn't have a positive feeling toward it, and you should have a warm feeling toward it, and you should have Hisairus and Hisragshus, but that cannot be the foundation of your Avodas Hashem. The foundation of Avodas Hashem is you get up for Shacharis because you have no choice, because Ribbon Hashem is your master and you're an Eved. You're in the army. In the army, you can't tell Jet, well, I'm not feeling it today. I'm not connecting today. You don't connect. I'll shoot you in the head if you don't get up. Right? There are certain things that are absolute, that there's no alternative. That's the foundation of Judaism. And that is, you're an Eved HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The only thing is, nobody likes to be an Eved. It's not easy to be an Eved. And it's very difficult to be an Eved. To give up your own desires and wants and cheshek to be subject to some other entity is a very difficult thing to do. So Rebbe Shalom said, no problem. I'm going to train you. You're going to go to Mitzrayim for 400 years, and I don't care if you fall to the 49th level of Tumah, and I don't care if you lose almost all your emunah. It's kedai to fall and descend so that you're kind of the most basic element of being a Jew, and that is to be an Eved. And after you learn how to be an Eved, we'll transition you from Avdei Pharoh to Avdei Hashem. But that's just a minor technicality, who the Adain is. The fundamental principle is you have to learn how to be an Eved. Once you're an Eved, we'll deal with who the Adain is afterwards. So you're going to go to boot camp for 400 years, the Shlah says. And you're going to serve Pharoh. And you can get up every morning to build the pyramids. Whether you like it or not, you're not connecting. You're not. The pyramids are not resonating with you. You're not connecting with your master. Who cares? You're an Eved. We'll deal with who you're going to be serving after the fact. That was the tachlis of Yitzias of Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim made Klal Yisrael who they are. That when a Yid is not in the mood or doesn't feel it or is not connecting, we do it anyway. Because Rebbe Hashem told us to. Once we practice being an Eved for 400 years, Rebbe Hashem says, okay, you're not serving this madman Pharoh. Now I'm going to transition you into being Avdei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But the Iker Yesod of being a Jew is being able to be an Eved HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Therefore, Avraham always thought that Eliezer was going to yarshin him. You know why? Because Eliezer's an Eved. And in order to be a Yid, you have to be an Eved. So Hashem said, Lo Yirash Chazeh, not this Eved. An Eved that's actually biologically related to you. But Avram always thought Eliezer was going to yarshin him and that he was his heir. Doesn't matter if he's Urur. He's an Eved. Eved is the Yesod of Yahadus. Avdus HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's why Eretz Yisrael is called Eretz Canaan. Canaan was Eved Avodim. It's the land of Avdus. It's a land that only works when Klal Yisrael relates to HaKadosh Baruch Hu as Avodim. And therefore, despite the fact we don't let the Canaanim stay there and we wipe them out unless Chai Kol Neshama, it's the land of Canaan, Hachna, Avdos, the land of Avdos. Yitzia Mitzrayim taught the Yid how to be an Eved, and then the Rebbe Shalom says, I'm going to transition you from being an Eved to Pharoh to being an Eved to me. Incredible Bnei Yissaschar. Bnei Yissaschar says, there are only two mitzvahs say in the Torah, that if you're not Mekayim it, you're Chayiv Kares. What are they? Pesach and Milah. Tefillin, no punishment. Tzitzis, no punishment. Nothing else. No other mitzvah in the Torah has a punishment except for Dam Pesach and Dam Milah. Why Dafka Dam Pesach and Dam Milah? Says Bnei Yissaschar, Davar Nifla Ma'od. Says Bnei Yissaschar, if you have an Eved, an Eved Kanani. You want to buy an Eved Kanani. So you go over to him, and you go over to his master, and you say, I want to buy this Eved Kanani. So now the Jew is buying the Eved Kanani from a guy. So halacha is you have to be toivel the Eved Kanani, that he's now chayiv in some mitzvahs. You're toivel him though, l'shem avdos. Now what if the Eved Kanani gets smart and he says, I don't want to go to the mikvah to be an Eved, I want to go to the mikvah to be a ben chayrin. So he could sort of chap on to he could sort of outsmart the Adain, jump into the mikvah and be mechavein to be toivel l'shem mecherus, and he's free! So the halacha is the Adain has to, in order to make sure that the Eved is in toivel l'shem cherus, the Adain exerts authority over the Eved in the mikvah. He holds something over his head in the mikvah to ensure that the tefillah is l'shem avdos and not l'shem cherus. So too, we were avadim to Pharoh in Mitzrayim, and the purpose was for the Rebbe Hashem to transition us the night of Yetzias Mitzrayim from Avdei Pharoh into Avdei Hashem. So Klal Yisrael might get smart and say, well, once we're going free from Pharoh, let's go free entirely and run away. We don't want to be avadim to Hashem. So Hashem, the night of Yetzias Mitzrayim, had to exert authority over us so that we don't go out and our toivel l'shem ben chayrin. So Rebbe Hashem gave us two mitzvahs the night of Yetzias Mitzrayim to exert authority over us so that we don't leave Pharoh and go free completely. What was the authority that Rebbe Hashem showed upon us the night of Yetzias Mitzrayim? Dam Pesach and Dam Milah. So if you don't keep Pesach or Milah, you basically could throw away the whole Torah. Because now, the Rebbe Hashem freed us from Pharoh. Once he freed us from Pharoh, we could go out free completely. So what's holding us as loyal to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the only reason we have to keep the Torah is because of Pesach and Milah. Therefore, Pesach and Milah carry with it such a severe penalty, because if you don't observe it, then we're not even obligated to keep the Torah in the first place, Bnei Yissaschar says. The Pesach and the Milah are the way the Rebbe Hashem exerts his authority over us as we're being transitioned from Avdei Pharoh to Avdei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore, we want to suggest as follows. The whole purpose of Yetzias Mitzrayim was to train us to be avodim to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That by being an Eved to Pharoh, we practice doing what somebody else wanted us to do. It's not an easy thing. And we all want to serve Hashem. It's so geshmak. It's so geshmak. Learning is so geshmak. Davening is so geshmak. Keeping mitzvahs is so geshmak. And we should. It is very geshmak. But that cannot be it. Because it doesn't always work. Because it's not always very geshmak. Sometimes you're gonna have a morning and you're going to be dead tired. And if the only reason why you serve the Rebbe Hashem is because it's very geshmak, then you're not going to serve him when it's not very geshmak. And if the only reason you serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu is because it makes you feel good, then when it doesn't make you feel good, you're not going to serve him. There has to be a fundamental commitment to the Torah that I am an Eved Hashem. And when I was in Mitzrayim, I got up early in the morning to build pyramids. So at least now I don't have to build pyramids. But I'm a servant of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the yisoid of Kol HaTorah Kula. Avas Hashem is beautiful, not yet. Yiras Hashem is beautiful, not yet. All the holy madregos and all the big milos and all the things we aspire to are wonderful, but that's not first base. First base is Ki li b'nei Yisrael avodim. That's the fundamental commitment to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Therefore, the first mitzvah the Rebbe Hashem gives Klal Yisrael after the Torah was given is you should know, if you have an Eved Ivri, you better let him go free, because you are my slaves, you are my servants. That's mitzvah number one. The first mitzvah in the Torah is, a Yid has to recognize we are avodim to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Before you put on tefillin, before you know about any other mitzvah, that's number one. Number one is Ki li b'nei Yisrael avodim. That's why the first mitzvah, Mishpatim, is you have an Eved Ivri, you better let him go free, because I don't want nobody being a servant to anyone but me. That's the first mitzvah in the Torah. And that's why the night of Yetzias Mitzrayim, the Rebbe Hashem made a deal with Klal Yisrael. I'm only taking you out on condition that you let your Eved Ivri go free, because you are my slaves. You say, why is Rebbe Hashem busy with the mitzvah that's not Noigeya yet? There's no Yovel. Why is this, the whole Yetzias Mitzrayim, contingent upon this? That's the whole reason we were in Mitzrayim in the first place. Why were we in Mitzrayim? We were in Mitzrayim to learn to be avodim to Hashem. Says Hashem, I ain't taking you out if you don't know that lesson. That's why I brought you here in the first place. How could I take you out of Mitzrayim and make you free if the reason I brought you to Mitzrayim is for you to learn to be an Eved to me? If you don't free your Eved Ivri, and now he's going to be an Eved to somebody else, then you obviously blew 400 years of Mitzrayim. So you're going to take a Martseya, Gematria 400, you're going to bore a hole in this guy's ear, because he made it that he made the 400 years of Mitzrayim for naught. He blew the whole tachlis of being in Mitzrayim in the first place. Listen to the beautiful teretz. The Marsha asked that if a guy speaks Lashon Hara, we should make a hole in his ear. Oh, he heard on our Sinai that don't speak Lashon Hara. A guy who wears shatnez, we should drill a hole in his ear. So we say like this: if a guy speaks Lashon Hara, it's not that he didn't listen to Mitzrayim. I don't know, when Rebbe Shalom said Lo Yisraelach Racha Ba'amecha, the guy got a phone call, he missed that one. Nish Geferlach, we're not going to make a hole in his ear. If the guy wears shatnez, when Rebbe Shalom said Lo Yisrael Shatnez, he got a text message and he forgot to turn his phone off and he missed it. So what are you going to do? You're not going to make a hole in his ear. But if a guy doesn't free his Eved Ivri, it's not that he missed the words Ki li b'nei Yisrael avadim. If you're standing at Har Sinai and you know what's going on right now, the Rebbe Shalom is giving Klal Yisrael 613 mitzvahs. That means you can't go here, you can't visit there, you can't look at this, you can't listen to that, you can't say this, you can't eat that. Basically, the Rebbe Shalom is restricting what you eat, what you look at, what you listen to, where you go, how you talk. So forget about the minutia of this mitzvah, that mitzvah. What is the overarching message you hear, even if you're not listening to every word? What do you hear the Rebbe Shalom saying when you hear 613 mitzvahs? You hear one thing: Ki li b'nei Yisrael avadim. If you're standing at Har Sinai and you hear 613 mitzvahs, if you're wearing this article of clothing, put tzitzis on it. Put tefillin on your arm. You have to eat this food at this time. You could sleep now, you can't sleep then. You could do this. That means every aspect of your life has the do's and the don'ts. So if you speak Lashon Hara, you wear shatnez, so you missed one thing, we're not going to drill a hole in your ear. But if you hold on to an Eved Ivri, that means you don't understand that we are all avodim t'HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You missed Matan Torah, you missed Har Sinai. Ki li b'nei Yisrael avodim is not one of the 613 mitzvahs. It's the yisoid of Kol HaTorah Kula. The whole tachlis of the Torah is to recognize we are avodim t'HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is not our world. So people think, look, I have a life, and I have a job, and I have a family, so I'm going to get up when I'm able to, and I'm going to have a schedule, I'm going to keep my hours the way I'm able to, and I'll try to fit God in. Then you're not an Eved to Hashem. You don't have a life, you don't have a job. The Ribbon Shalom gives you the mandate. You'll try to fit in what you need to do for yourself within the Ribbon Shalom's avdos. Not the other way. It's not your world. Ribbon Shalom's the other. That's the yisoid of Kol HaTorah Kula. Lashon Hara is a detail. Shatnez is a detail. Avdus is the yisoid of Kol HaTorah Kula. It's the first mitzvah Ribbon Shalom tells us. Ki li b'nei Yisrael avadim. That's the yisoid of Har Sinai. So coming back to the question on the Gemara, my favorite question. The Gemara says that why do we drill a hole in his ear by the door and the doorpost? Because the door and the doorpost heard in Mitzrayim the Ribbon Shalom say the words Ki li b'nei Yisrael avadim. So we asked, no, he didn't. He didn't say Ki li b'nei Yisrael Mitzrayim. It's a pasuk in Parshas Bahar. So what does the Gemara mean that the door and the doorpost heard in Mitzrayim Ki li b'nei Yisrael avadim? So I want to say as follows. The same way, the Rebbe Shalom didn't really say at Har Sinai Ki li b'nei Yisrael avadim. It's that if you're listening carefully at Har Sinai at all 613 mitzvahs, the message that you hear is Ki li b'nei Yisrael avadim. So I want to tell you a pshat in a bracha in Shemona Esrei. The first bracha in Shemona Esrei. This pshat is in the Eitz Yosef says this pshat, and Rav Shimon Schwab in the Iyon Tefillah says this pshat. Rav Victor Miller in his Sefer on Tefillah says this pshat. What does it mean? Goimel chasadim toivim. God does a lot of kindness. V'kainei hakol. And He owns everything. He buys everything. What does it mean God buys everything? What kind of currency? How does He buy? American Express, Discover, check, cash. How does Rebbeinu Shalom buy everything? So there's a really gorgeous essay of Rav Shimon Schwab, Parshas Vayigash. Remember the story? The Mitzrayim have nothing to eat, so they come to Yosef. They say, Yosef, give us food. So Yosef, we're going to give you food. You got to pay for it. Here's the money. So they buy the food. And then the next year they have no more money left. They say, Yosef, what should we do? We have no money left. So Yosef says, I don't know, what do you have? They say, we have cattle. So they give Yosef the cattle and they take the food. Then there's no more cattle left, so they come to Yosef and they say, Yosef, we're starving, we're going to die, what should we do? So Yosef says, what do you got? They said, Ein lanu kol bilti gviyaseinu, all we have is our bodies. So Yosef said, no problem, I'll buy you as avadim. And now all of Mitzrayim becomes the avadim of Yosef, and that's why Mitzrayim is called Mibeis Avadim, because we were avadim to avadim, because everyone was an eved to Yosef. So Rav Schwab asks, this whole story is is irrelevant. Why do we need to know Yosef's economic plan and how to sell produce to Mitzrayim? So the next time we become a king of a country and they don't have what to eat, well, no, first you'll sell it for money, then sell it for cows, and then buy them? Why do we need to know the economic and financial arrangement of Yosef and the Mitzrayim? Says Reb Schwab, the Torah is teaching you a fundamental principle. That what do you do if somebody gives you so much that money cannot pay back and possessions cannot pay back? Well, how do you show appreciation if you're in a matzav, if you're in a situation where you don't have enough money to show appreciation? You don't have enough possessions to show appreciation. How do you show appreciation? The way to show appreciation is only that you become an eved to that person and you have to subjugate yourself to them. Says Reb Schwab, he says, I have a simple question. If chas v'shalom a person could not see, how much money would a person pay to be able to see again? Mistama, $1 million, at least, right? And if a person couldn't hear, how much money would a person pay? Mistama, $1 million. Let's say it's covered by insurance, okay? Or you could get the money. And let's say a person couldn't get out of bed. How much money would a person pay to get out of bed? No. And let's say a person couldn't think. And let's say a person didn't have teeth. And let's say a person couldn't move their arms, chas v'shalom. And let's say a person didn't have a family. And how many of these thousands of benefits does Hashem give us every day? So how much money do we owe Hashem? You could sit and make a calculation now, probably for the rest of your life, how many benefits Rebbeinu Hashem gives us daily. And we'd recognize that even if we're multimillionaires, chances are we don't have enough money to pay back HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Chances are we don't have enough possessions to pay back HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So what do? We owe God, we could see, so we owe Him for that at least $1 million. And we could move our hands, we owe Him at least $1 million for that. And we could smell, that's got to be worth something. We could hear, and we have teeth, and we have gums, and we have a tongue, we have a liver, we have an esophagus, we have a heart, we have lungs. How much money would a person pay if their lungs were not functioning on their own? A person pay all their money. So how do we pay back the Ribbono Shel Olam? We owe Him big time. We say, Ma ashiv LaHashem. How can I repay God? So we learn from Parshas Vayigash, if you can't pay back in money and you can't pay back possessions, we tell the Ribbono Shalom, Bilti gviyaseinu, all we have is our bodies that are now kanoi to you as an eved. We're your eved. When we say we're avadim to Hashem, it's not the Pshat Ribbono Shalom is a taskmaster and a dictator. It's He owns us because He gives us so much hatava and so much benefit and so much kindness, and we have absolutely no way to pay Him back, that the only way we could reciprocate a little bit for what He gives us is we become by default avadim. Anybody with any degree of decency would recognize that if you owe somebody so much, you got to, at the very least, if you can't pay them back, listen to them. In that sense, we're avadim to Hashem. Says Rabbi Victor Miller, says Rabbi Shimon Schwab. Goimel chasadim toivim. The Rebbe Hashem bestows on us good kindness. And memela, v'koineh hakol, He buys everyone. How does He buy us? Because He gives us so much hatava and we have no way to pay Him back. Goimel chasadim toivim, v'koineh hakol. So He buys us as avodim. That's the meaning of the bracha. That's the lesson of Parshas Vayigash. What do you do when you can't pay back in money? So we asked the question, when Rebbe Hashem jumped over the Jewish houses, he didn't say the words, Ki li b'nei Yisrael avodim. That's a pasuk in Bahar. So I would like to suggest a novel approach. You know what? When God jumped over Yankel's house, or Beryl's house, He did not say the words, Hey Yankel, Hey Beryl, Ki li b'nei Yisrael avodim. It's a pasuk in Bahar. Avad, it's a pasuk in Bahar. The Gemara is not saying, no, it doesn't belong in Bahar, it really belongs when Hashem jumped over the Jewish house. But I have a question for you. If God is knocking off every single Egyptian, and He jumps over Yankel's house, what message should Yankel hear from that? What does Yankel get out of that? Yankel gets, Rebbe Hashem is killing everyone, but He's saving my life. How indebted am I to Rebbe Hashem? What a great hatava the Rebbe Hashem gave me. What is the result of such an acceptance of chesed from HaKadosh Baruch Hu? The result is we hear nothing other than the Rebbe Hashem. He doesn't have to say the words, but it's obvious. What's occurring is Goimel chasadim toivim v'koineh hakol. Rebbe Hashem is buying Yankel. He's telling Yankel, you can't pay me back for this. You don't have enough money to pay me back. You don't have enough possessions to pay me back. But you know what's happening, Yankel? Goimel chasadim toivim v'koineh hakol. You're my Evan now, at the very least. If I ask you to get up for Shachris, or I ask you not to speak Lashon Hara, or if somebody insults you to keep your mouth closed, that's the least you could do after I saved your skin. Ki li b'nei Yisrael avodim. So when the Gemara says that when the Rebbe Hashem jumped over the doors of the Jewish people, it's not that he said the words Ki li b'nei Yisrael avodim. He didn't have to. It's obvious. That's what the result is. The result is Goimel chasadim toivim v'koineh hakol. And therefore, it's important to take note that the very first mitzvah that occurs after the giving of the Torah is Ki sikneh eved ivri, the inyan that Ki li b'nei Yisrael avodim. And this is the yesod, probably the most overlooked yesod in our generation, where yes, we're not on such a high madrega. So it's very important that we do connect to the mitzvahs, and we do try to understand and appreciate the tam and the reason, and why it's meaningful, and why we get something out of it, and why it's inspiring. But at the end of the day, a person has to wake up in the morning and say, I owe so much to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's no way I could possibly pay Him back. All I could do is Ki li b'nei Yisrael avodim. We are avodim to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we should be zoicha to feel this avdos and appreciate all the kindness Rebbe Hashem does to us. And this again is not an imposed avdos. This is an avdos that, as a moral person, a person should impose upon themselves as a form of hakar satov. And this is the yesod of kol haTorah kula. Shkoyach, everyone.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.